Today we have Sharon Newman with us. Sharon is certified advanced grief recovery specialist and a senior program manager. She has over 40 years of experience working with individuals, families, health, and education organizations. And there's so much more to Sharon than just those two sentences. And Sharon, please take it away. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, Brenda, thanks so much for having me. It's really a privilege to be with all of you today. So grief recovery specialist, I'm going to start and tell you what that means. A grief recovery specialist, I'm one of the original 100 advanced grief recovery specialists. Grief recovery specialists aren't necessarily doctors. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counselor. We have advanced education credentials that allow us and license us to provide educational support programs and interactions and groups that happen to have therapeutic value. Many grief recovery specialists work in concert with physicians and doctors and other healthcare professionals. In Traverse City, I have my private practice with two psychologists on 8th Street, Dr. Fall and Dr. Diedrich. And we work together with individuals and groups. We refer back and forth, and we work independently as well. So that's what a grief recovery specialist is. Interestingly, my credentials allow me to work internationally. So in addition to having the private practice in Traverse City, where I serve people and groups in the Northern Michigan area, I have clients all over the world, and we work virtually these days. And it's a great honor and privilege to work with everybody. I did not know when I entered this field how I always knew it was important because everyone grieves. I did not know just how important it would become this past year. I'm also I was the bereavement coordinator for Munson Hospice when the hospital system merged. They recruited me because I have program management development experience. They recruited me to expand their bereavement program through the 23 county service area. So a little over 5 years ago, I took that project on. It was very full-time. And at the beginning of 2020, I actually began to step back because I wanted to get more involved with my private practice. And this wonderful woman, Erin Gray, if any of you are receiving services from Munson Hospice Bereavement, you get letters from her. So I'm mentoring her in that position and have been since called back to help her because we've established a COVID bereavement program. We've had nearly 500 deaths in the region from COVID. And for every person who dies, there's an average of statistically 2.1 people or more who are affected and grievers in that situation. So in addition to our regular bereavement program through Munson, we have added a large COVID bereavement program. And if I'm imagining we have 13 people on this call, and I imagine some, if not all of you, have been impacted by the loss of someone during this time. And even if the loss wasn't from COVID, if the person you cared about was hospitalized during this time, you may not have had the opportunity to visit with them, talk with them, hold their hand, provide comfort, say goodbye the way you normally would. So even if death in your circle of family and friends was not by COVID, a death during this past year would have been a much more difficult experience than would have been before COVID came because of all the restrictions that we're living by right now, and important restrictions to keep us healthy and safe while we figure this thing out. I come to this, and some of you I see already know me, so you might know this story, but I evolved to this work and focusing on this work as a result of loss in my early life. As a young girl, I was only 7 when my little sister was diagnosed with a very rare disease, one of the 10 worst diseases known to man, very, very rare. Initially, they said she was going to die. She was 5. That was in the fall of her 5th year. And the doctor said, there's nothing we can do. Go home, have Christmas now, make a memory. These are similar messages that people who are dealing with COVID are getting. So, of course, when an atomic bomb drops off in your life, nothing seems real. It's a very surreal experience. And eventually we learned that my sister would not die, but she was left terribly, terribly disabled with this disease that turns muscle to bone. She's a living statue. And by the grace of God, she's still with us. She's 62 years old. She was never supposed to live this long. We've learned a lot, my sister and I, about loss and grief. And we learned everything that we've learned in this journey over these last almost 60 years. I'm going to really age myself here. Applies to what all of us are experiencing now. So my hope is to share some of what I've learned, some tips. I have some reading resources, and also perhaps if you are interested, we can unmute and have a discussion. But maybe we'll start with, I see someone in chat. Oh, okay. Maybe just start with understanding what grief is. I made a really nice presentation for an international group that I did in November. I don't want the slides and the technology to interfere with this connection that we have. So I'm just going to look at my notes to refresh my memory a little bit and keep me on track. So one of the things we need to know about grief is that we can have grief not just because of someone dying. Grief is a natural, normal response to any change in our lives, any change to the normal pattern of living. So I'm guessing everyone here has experienced a disruption to their normal pattern of living that may also have been peppered with health issues, economic issues, impact to your business, your family life. Maybe you're teaching children at home while you're also working from home and your regular support system isn't there. Everything's different. So if you're feeling anxious, angry, depressed, concerned, exhausted, frustrated, any number of emotions, that would be normal. There's nothing wrong with you. You're having a normal response to a really unusual, difficult situation. One of the good things about this particular situation is that we are all sharing it together. So there's a lot of promise for us to come together and heal together as we continue to go forward and understand why this has happened, why COVID came, why people are reacting the way they are. Understanding grief and what it is and how we respond to it and how we can help others really is going to help us as we recover as individuals, families, communities, and society as a whole. In fact, as one of the projects that I'm working on is with an organization called Tin Soldiers, which is based in South Africa. And I'm on the advisory board, and through that relationship, I'm working as co-executive producer of a documentary film on COVID and what contributed to getting this started and what we can do as a human population to keep it from happening again. So we're hopeful that that will be out before the end of the year. We'll see how that goes. Having answers to questions really helps. It gives us a map for what we can do to help make things better. And that helps us feel less like we're on a rolling sea in a ship without a paddle or a sail or a motor. It gives us something to hang on to. Other things that help if you're feeling grief, the response to change, that bucket of emotions that builds up when our life is feeling in turmoil, is to seek support and help. Well, holy cow, how do we do that when we can't see our friends in person? We can't meet the girls for lunch or coffee. We can't go visit our mom or our kids. Our normal support structures have been tampered with. I know that you guys already know how to reach out for support because here you are on this call. So I think as sick as we are of Zoom and virtual connections, it is one of the great saving graces of this time. I have a number of support groups that I do. Some of them are free. Others are more structured and have a fee, but at the end of the program, I'm going to give that information to Brenda, who'll share it with you. But even through this media, you know, when we so want to connect with each other, we just, when we're together, we hug each other like this, and we're trying really hard to reach heart to heart, because grief is not a head thing. It plays with our head, but it's really a matter of the heart. It's our hearts that are hurting. In Western culture especially, we don't have a lot of education about grief or what to do with it. We're kind of the suck it up, get out there, put on your big boy pants or your big girl pants, get out there and get on with it. One of the things we haven't done very well in Western culture is make the time to connect with our hearts, do the work we need to do to understand, first of all, what's going on inside ourselves, put on our own oxygen mask, and then be able to help our family and friends. We're really good workers. We get things done, but we do a lot with our head. And learning how to understand what our heart's feeling and how to communicate what our heart's feeling in a way that helps us and helps others is a great gift that we can give ourselves. So again, grief is the response to, yes, ma'am?
We do have a question about
Yes.
how do we talk with our children about the pandemic, even though it's been some time.
Oh,
Do you have any recommendations?
yes. So, children respond well when we make the time and space to be with them. They will model our behavior. So with our children, and you know your children better than anyone can, it'd be good to find some time and space to sit and talk, or maybe while you're eating, or create a really special time where you're going to sit and just talk and say to your son or daughter, you know, I just want to check in with you. I've been this is one example, depending on their age. I've been feeling this pandemic has really been challenging. And I know I've been feeling a little bit tired of it, a little bit sad for what's going on, and a little bit worried. I want to reassure you that I'm doing everything I can and we're okay, but I still have those feelings. And talk a little bit about your feelings. And so that's what we do in with this program, is help parents talk about their feelings so they can model that for their children. But if you don't have time for that, the really basic thing to do is to sit and talk about your feelings and then say, so, sweetheart, so that's how I've been feeling. How has it been for you? And be quiet. Give them time and space to say, and try to find the words to describe how they're feeling. And you may be aware of some symptoms they're showing of stress, and you might be able to draw them out a little bit. But it's up to us as parents to be the emotional leaders. We can't expect our children to talk about their emotions unless we talk about ours first. And then provide them the reassurance that we're there for them and create a safe place for them to share their feelings, and honor the need for confidentiality about that. They might be embarrassed, especially if they haven't talked about their feelings before. They might need help finding words. Does that help?
I think so.
Okay.
Let's see if they respond.
Thanks for that good question. That's a really important one. I was actually going to bring it up if you didn't ask.
And another one would be, how can an individual tell if they're actually coping with what's happening in the pandemic?
Okay. All right. Are you functioning in your activities of daily living? You might not feel very good, but are you functioning? Is number one. Are you able to do your job if you have a job? Have you been able to make the transition and do the job and feel like you've got that going? Do you feel like you've been able to create a safe environment in your home? Are you sleeping okay? Are you eating okay? Are you reaching out to the support system that you do have? One of the worst things we can do is not talk about what's going on. We all need at least one go-to person. Somebody that will listen to us, somebody that will listen without judgment or criticism and just let us empty that pot of emotion inside and just let us sort it out. Letting that stuff sit inside isn't good, and that can feed the sleeplessness, the fear, the devastation that we might be feeling. If you're finding ways to deal with built up emotional energy that release it, that are healthy and not destructive, like going for a walk outside. It's amazing to me how many people are just staying indoors. It's okay to go for a walk. That fresh air is so renewing, and breathe deeply. Now, if you've been sick and that's not possible for you, you could still sit by the window and let the sun kiss your face. And myself, I have a little bit of, I have a tendency, I have asthma. And so I have to be careful about temperature and certain weather conditions. But if I can't get outside, I don't have it sitting here. I usually show it, but I have what I call the happy light. We don't get a lot of sunshine. We've got to be proactive in whatever way we can. So when they were on sale, I bought one of those. I thought, I wonder if that would help. And you know what? It really does. I bought one. I took my Bed Bath and Beyond coupon and I got my $20 off, and just 15 minutes sitting with my coffee helps. Another thing that's helpful is establishing some sort of routine. This has been hard for all of us because I know working for Munson and in my private practice, we had to pivot. I'm also under contract as a director of programming communications at The Rock Community Center and Youth Center in Kingsley. I took that on after the suicides and other issues that came up in the Kingsley community. We had to pivot all our programming. So there's been a lot of stress. I think if you're here on this call, you are probably coping. You're seeking out resources and you're seeking out connection. Those are the biggest things you can do. If you're worried that you're feeling overwhelmed, I think, you're welcome to pop into any one of my free support groups anytime, and that contact information will be shared by me with Brenda, who'll share it with you, or you can call me up and we can chat. Lots of people are feeling anxious and concerned, and the events of last week have not been helpful. Things are going to be rough for a little while, and we need to lean into and help each other through it. And we need to feed the, what was the saying? There's a, do I have it here? I don't. There's, we can feed there are two wolves that are always present, fighting for control in our lives. One is despair, and the other one is hope. Guess which wolf wins? And this is a Cherokee legend. The wolf you feed. So it's really important to feed yourself hope. There's all kinds of reasons to hope. Stay away from toxic people. That may include relatives and friends who are just, their grief may be so overwhelming and out of control that they're raging, and you can't really have a two-way conversation with them. I'll give you an example of how you might handle that if you're interested, if you have a relative or friend who's just kind of over the top right now, or if you're feeling over the top. I think we all have from time to time this past year. My husband is recently diagnosed with head and neck cancer. He'll be starting chemo and radiation soon. This is on the heels of a cancer he had last year that he had a good outcome from. So this came out of the blue. Fortunately, we have a really good support system. We're good. We're sad that he has to deal with this, but we feel optimistic. Anyhow, so as the word's gotten around, people have reached out to him and me and in such loving ways. It's really beautiful. But the other night, 2 nights before the events on Capitol Hill, he had a friend from Nashville call him. Friend from 40 years, went to college with them. They worked together in their internship, and they've stayed close. They have a little bit different political viewpoints, but the friendship is primary. Well, this friend called him and to say, hey, how you doing? I'm worried about you. And so the call started like that, but it quickly went to my husband's friend going into a tirade about what was happening politically. And he ranted for almost 20 minutes. And my husband, out of the love and friendship that he had, just listened, kind of held the phone away from his ear. And when his friend stopped to take a breath, he said, hey man, what are you so angry about? And then he ranted for 10 more minutes. My husband then said, hey, it's me. What are you so angry about? Silence. The call wrapped up. I said, wow, he's really over the moon, he's really overwhelmed, not wanting to listen or reason things out or have an intellectual or thoughtful discussion. But, was left with, hey, man, I care about you. I'm sorry you're feeling so angry. The next evening, the friend called again and said, hey, Jay, you're right. I don't know why I'm so angry. I was calling to see how you're doing. I love you and I care about you. So that's a good example of what can happen if you step back and don't engage. Give someone an opportunity to vent, especially if there's someone you have a close relationship with, and just give them a chance to vent, reassure them of your love, stay calm yourself, and just don't buy into the relationship. The bait to get into an argument. The best way to calm things down is to not engage and to step back. And sometimes that means stepping way, way back, especially while you're trying to take care of your own sense of well-being. And that goes in the business community too. It's, we're all walking a tightrope in our day-to-day work as well. So I hope that was helpful.
Setting boundaries, right?
Setting boundaries. Yep. Take care of yourself first. So, we're in a process of change. Everybody's grieving. And when we grieve, we go through, first there's the sudden change and we have resistance to it and there's chaos. We're kind of in a chaos time right now. But what you're going to see happening, and maybe you're some of these people. I don't know what you all do out in the community, but maybe you're somebody with a transforming idea. A transforming idea for yourself or for your family or for your organization. And as you formulate this transforming idea and you adapt to change and bring it forward and give it some time, you'll find yourself in a new status quo. And in grief, we call that reconciliation, that process that we go through. I don't want to change. I don't like this change. I don't like that my mother's dying or my wife or husband is sick or they lost their job or we had a plan. Our plan did not include this. And the grief comes because we had different expectations than what happened. That doesn't mean your life is over. That just means you're on a different adventure. And if we take the time to learn the skills to adapt to change and work at becoming someone who has the ability to transform and bring our ideas to the table and bring our emotional energy to the table for the good of ourselves, for the good of the family, and for good of our organization, we will do well. Change is always going to happen in our lives. This is a historic, monumental change, but it's also an opportunity for us to rise to the occasion. And we can do that if we lean into each other and tap into the resources that are available. So, but it's important to keep in mind that grief, we all experience it 100%, no matter what the change is. Maybe we've had a change in our job and our life partner or spouse has lost their job, or we're teaching the kids at home, or whatever the stresses we're feeling. And I'm working with people who've lost 4 family members to COVID. I'm working with parents who lost a daughter. I'm working with 500 different families in various settings who are just dealing with the unimaginable. The good news is, so some of these people I've been working with since this all first started. This transformation time in dealing with grief, it's not an instant fix. there's work to do. There's self-discovery involved. And this leaning in that I talk about, whoever your trusted people are, whether it's friends, family, or professionals. What's wonderful to see is the transformation that's happening with people after these tremendous losses and changes 6 months out. They're positive, they're hopeful, they're taking their grief and this awful experience that they've been through, and they're honoring the experience by making it matter. Example, the parents whose daughter died of COVID. It was a very difficult situation, like all of them are. The daughter, it was during that time when people were afraid to go to the hospital and didn't know how they could see their doctor. They were doing virtual appointments and talking on the phone. And some people were waiting too long to go in to get help, fearing that if they went in, something bad would happen. And that was understandable because of how all this has come about. But that was her situation. Their young adult daughter had waited too long, and she died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. And she was engaged to be married. And so in addition to her parents, she left devastated, fiance and friends. When they first started coming to the group, they could hardly talk. They cried and cried and cried. I want to talk about tears in a minute. But as they've gone through this process of leaning in, getting the support, processing what happened, sharing it, not holding those emotions in, now they've begun the transformation, and they're honoring their daughter in so many ways. They're helping the fiance get settled in a new apartment. They've decided to help young people who are struggling during this time, who are unemployed, who've lost their jobs. They're getting involved in those ways that they can, in honor and in memory of their daughter, and it's giving them great joy. They're seeing that other people are hurting, and they're seeing that they have two hands, a heart, and for them, they have a modest bank account that allows them to help a little bit more than maybe you or I could. But that's giving them peace and joy and meaning. We have to search for meaning in these situations, because we're grieving because our heart is broken, and we have to find the meaning in this. Why me? Why now? Why did this happen? And turn it in that direction towards, okay, what did I learn from this? And how can I make a difference in someone else's life? That's the greatest thing that brings healing to people. Once they get through that personal time of healing, which involves cocooning and crying and all kinds of emotional expression. I did want to tell you about tears. So in Psychology Today, there was an article that summed up why tears are important. And this goes for men and women. Tears are nature's remedy. There are hormones, stress hormones, specific to grief, and they've studied them under microscope and other ways, that are specific to grief, that have their best release through tears. So imagine all these emotions in your body. They create stress hormones that can actually make you sick, physically sick. Tears, if you feel like crying during this time, do it, because your body's telling you to release those hormones. And the author here said, tears are your body's release valve for stress, sadness, grief, anxiety, and frustration. We can also have tears of joy, as when a child is born, or tears of relief when a difficulty's passed. It's important to try to let go of outmoded, untrue conceptions about crying. It's really good to cry. It's healthy to cry. This helps to emotionally clear the sadness and stress. It's also essential to resolve grief when waves of tears periodically come over us after we experience a loss. Tears help us process the loss so we can keep living with open hearts. And there's a lot more about that, but I know our time is limited. Tears, physical activity, getting out in fresh air, beating the drums. I've got one guy who comes home, he says his person died, and I discovered that he had a drum set at home. He says, well, I don't play that anymore. I don't feel like it. I encouraged him to give it a try and to see how he felt after. And he now regularly plays his drum set. And just like physical exercise and breathing fresh air, it's releasing. It releases the energy. It releases endorphins that help us feel better. Other suggestions that help us towards reconciliation and process emotion. Talking it out, writing it out, write a poem, write a letter, keep a journal, think it out loud, play, whatever that means to you. Art, painting, sculpting, dancing, singing is amazing. I sing when no one's here. My mother was the professional singer. I did not inherit her voice, but when no one's around, I will sing. I'll turn on my favorite station or songs on Pandora and I'll sing along. So I'm going to send you a list of things. Here's one of the books I'm going to suggest, because we're all going through this process of accepting change. It's so difficult, no matter when change comes. We're so used to, humans love patterns. We like routine. We thrive in routine. What is routine about this past year? Nothing. Every day is different. Every time you turn on the news, there's some other crisis. One of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves is accepting that we're living in a time of change and riding with the tide, doing what we can to keep ourselves and our families safe and work with our community to make it a good place to be. Feed the hope wolf, not the desperation wolf, with your hopefulness and your positive thoughts. But there's a good book called The Gifts of Acceptance by Dan Miller, embracing people and things as they are. So that would be a good read if you're interested in that. And I'll send this list to you. I'm guessing most of you know Sesame Street too. And in my PowerPoint, I won't read this whole thing, but I like to point it out to people. There's one of the writers for Sesame Street was a mom who, she and her husband were expecting a child, and they had all this anticipation and expectation of what being a parent would like. And their child was born with Down syndrome. And so she wrote this wonderful piece that's gone around the world hundreds of thousands of times called Welcome to Holland. And she writes about the experience of, we were planning, having this child, we had this expectation. It was like planning a trip to Italy. And we had our bags packed and our passports and our maps and all the places we wanted to go and things we were going to do. We get on the plane and we're on our way to Italy. And then the flight attendant announces, welcome to Holland. Holland? What are we doing in Holland? We were all ready for Italy. And she talks about her experience and about how if they stayed in the disappointment and anger and grief place, if they didn't get beyond that and didn't do what they needed to get beyond that, they would have missed the beautiful experience of Holland. Yep, there were still people going to Italy, and it made them sad to hear about their trips because it reminded them of what they used to hope for, but they were really enjoying Holland. The Again, grief is a matter of the heart, not the head. Sharing your feelings with someone you trust is important. I'm not going to get into this part, but in our groups, we talk about avoiding the Academy Award-winning performance and being honest about how you're feeling with people you trust and staying away from people who don't understand. This is not helpful to you. If they don't get it, they don't get it. Transforming the emotion of change. You know, sometimes there are no words. And this is what's really hard for me, because at the end of my in-person sessions in our groups, one of the ways we reaffirm with each other is we have a big group hug. And, you know, a hug communicates what words can't. And so that's missing. And we have struggled with that, but this is why. So I'm hugging you, whatever you guys are going through in your personal life, in your head and your heart and in your businesses, it's going to be okay. You're going to find your way. Oh, Happy New Year, Susan. You're welcome. It's good to see you on. And remember,
Sharon, someone also said, appreciate the intimacy and the authenticity of your words today. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Do I have a few more minutes, or are we almost done? Okay.
Does anyone have anything for Sharon? Any comments or anything you'd like to ask her? Radio silence. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll keep going. I love this. On my Facebook page, I try to post something positive each day. And because of how important it is to feed the hope wolf and not the despair wolf. And I love this little picture. Feel free to friend me on Facebook. Your mind will always believe everything you tell it. Feed it hope. Feed it truth. Feed it with love. You're worth it, and everyone who's in your circle is worth it. And remember the value, or if you don't already know this, there's value in remembering. We will remember. This is like year 1 AC after COVID. Last year was before COVID, or the year before. I call it BC, 1 BC or 0 BC. It will be good to remember what it was like before. Wow, what an amazing time we lived. We've had many, many years without a pandemic. This isn't the first time we've had a pandemic. I have a physician friend who became a physician because of her experience during the polio pandemic. Oh, you're welcome. She was 7 years old. She was at Girl Scout camp. It was supposed to be a week. If you've ever been a 7-year-old away at camp, you know that brings a lot of excitement and also anxiety and homesickness. Your first time away from home, with sleeping with a bunch of kids, girls, boys with the boys. But while they were at camp, and then writing letters home, I miss you, I'm having fun, but I miss you. And then looking forward to going home and sharing your experience. Well, that summer, the polio epidemic hit while she was at camp. My friend and all the other kids that were there for 2 months, isolated with their camp directors and away from their family. And this is before we could text and video chat, and it was such an impactful, powerful, and traumatic experience for all those kids. For her, it led her to become a physician. She never forgot it, and she never took her family for granted again, and all the preciousness that she had. And she transformed the emotional energy from that trauma into becoming a physician to help other people, to do research. She's actually at Mayo now. So, but remembering how things were, I remember going to Red Ginger at least once a month with my husband. We would have date night. We're so bummed that we can't go. We have such a thriving, wonderful downtown, and we're foodies. And we're kind of tired of making all our own food all the time. We do the drive up, we keep the businesses going, but it's just not the same being greeted by the people in the wonderful restaurants. But we remember, and while we're eating what we make here, we talk about it. Wasn't that a great meal? Do you remember that time? There's value in cocooning. Just, sometimes you're just not, you don't want to talk. You just need to just rest. Just be quiet. That's okay. And we all need a personal sacred space, whether that's in a certain room in the house or a certain stump in the nearby woods where you sit and listen to the birds. Having a sacred space where you can just be still with yourself is so rejuvenating. Helps you get in touch with what's going on in here and process it. And connects you spiritually, whatever that means to you. I know that at Munson, when I look at the stats in our program, it's interesting to see that more than 50% of people describe themselves as spiritual but not religious, although they might have a church affiliation. So spirituality and religion aren't the same thing, but spirituality is something we all have in one way, shape, or form. Finding meaning, exploring yourself. This is a great time to reinvent yourself. Heck, why not? I've done it 5 times in my life. And being intentional about getting a hold on things, saying, I'm going to get through this. I'm going to figure it out, talk it out, write it out, plan it out. But don't miss the little things in life while you're dealing with all this worry, because the little things are the really big things. I love hearing that, I've been working from home with my kids. I know them now. I didn't know them before. This is a hidden gift of this challenging time. Putting on your own oxygen mask first, expressing yourself like we've been talking about. Volunteering. Now, volunteer opportunities are limited right now because of the contact, but there are still ways to volunteer. And if you want some ideas, you can get in touch with me. Do something you love every day, even if it's a little thing for yourself. My little love thing is right now, the clementines, those little halo oranges, they're in season. I am very intentional about standing at my sink and trying to peel it so it's all in one piece, and then eating it very slowly while I look out the window at the bird feeder and feel that juice explode in my mouth. If it's a good one, the juice is so sweet and so good. And I smell it, and then I drop the peel after I look at it and say, ooh, I did it. Drop it into the garbage disposal and blast the kitchen with that natural oil orange. And it's my little thing. It's 5 minutes. If I do that, I'm good. I can deal with everything else. I can then take whatever emotional energy I have and transform it into positive action. Positive action things. They can be little or gigantic. It depends on what's on your heart. My sister, who's a person who's turned to stone, can only move her fingers. She's lived like this for a very long time. She could be bitter. She could be angry. She's my inspiration, actually. I don't think I'd be as good of a person if I hadn't spent so much time with her. She is the president of the past president and co-founder of the organization that serves people with this disease globally. So she taps out. She has a back scratcher, and she used to tap it out on her keyboard. Now they have much more sophisticated equipment. So she helps guide that organization that now serves nearly 1,000 families around the world as a volunteer, never paid. She pulled this organization. We didn't know another family until we were almost 30. There's an article about that Ann Stanton wrote. I can share if you're interested. She knits hats for the newborns at the hospital. Every newborn at the Petoskey Hospital gets a whimsical hat made by Nancy. And then the stillborn babies they receive special hats as well. People get involved in issues. Think about, and we had a family member recently killed by a drunk driver. I think years back, if you're familiar with the Mothers Against Drunk Drivers movement, that helped change laws across the country. That was Grief United in a positive direction. We had differing laws all over the country, and so many people were being killed by drunk drivers. It was the mothers' emotional energy from their grief that caused them to get together and organize and honor their loved ones, their children who were killed. Oh, you're welcome, Whitney. Thank you. For women who've been, and men, the Never Again movement, the Me Too movement, Greta Thunberg, a young climate activist, and Malala. I mean, those are examples of people who have taken their grief and joined with others and helped make positive change, and everything in between. So if you're having emotional energy and grief and these issues, the first thing to do is take care of you. Get through that period, lean in, and perhaps with intention, for sure with intention, you can have a positive transforming experience for yourself, your family, and perhaps a whole lot of other people. But it starts with taking care of you. You first, then your family, and your friends, and your community. And so don't sit alone with a broken heart. Our hearts are hurting. We need each other. And I'm available and happy to help you find resources. I do this work to honor my sister, who is my greatest inspiration, in memory of my mother, who during World War II, most of us don't remember that. We weren't born yet. But during World War II, she was a young woman and her pilot fiance went off to war and was killed. And for 4 years, she worked with the USO and with, all the women went to work while the men went to war. Then she met my dad in the Veterans Benefit Office where she was working, and they got married and they went on to the next adventure. And there were a lot of adventures. And life doesn't end with change. It just changes. And it's up to us to find our way through it. So I thank you for letting me be here with you today. There are other books. I'll just, so there's the When Children Grieve I showed you. I love Healing After Loss. It's one of those little journals you can read every day. Let's see what it says today. Maybe that would be a good way to end it. Each entry begins with a quote from someone who wrote about loss, and then the author about her experience in losing her daughter, and a thought for the day. And oh my goodness, this couldn't be more perfect. Because the quote is from the writings of the author. Sometimes it's from Gandhi or Mother Teresa, but the quote is actually from the author. In the months after my daughter's death, I filled 4 notebooks with entries, writing sometimes daily, sometimes several times a day, sometimes only once in several days. I described feelings, the events of the day, occasions of recall, of sorrow and hope. It was a means of moving the grief away, getting it down somewhere else, siphoning it off. It may not be writing that's helpful to you. Perhaps talking with friends will have a similar effect, or painting or sculpture. The artist Kollwitz made a whole series of drawings in the aftermath of the death of her son. The important thing for most of us is not that we have made something of artistic value, but that we have taken a grief that lies like a lump against our hearts and moved it away from us. The value of having some pages on which we have recorded our feelings, as opposed to talking with friends, is that we can go back to the pages if we want to. We may never want to, but it relieves us of the pressure of having so much unresolved turmoil in our heads. Try putting it on paper. It may help you sort things out, and you will be free to move on into the next moments of your life. And her encouragement for the day is, I will be open to new ways of resolving my grief. Know that you're loved, cared about, and I'm available for you to reach out to anytime to help you connect in any way that you'd like. If you have any questions, I'm here. Otherwise, if not, then thank you so much for the generosity of your time. It's always a privilege.
Thank you for being here today, Sharon.
You're welcome.
And thank you all of you for joining us. We'll just hang out here for a moment. If you'd like to ask Sharon any questions, please do. Otherwise, have a fabulous week.